This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Place to Be Nation. This is Greg Phillips of the Hard-Traveling Fanboys, joined as always by my co-host, the illustrious, luxurious, sensuous, Nick Duke. Nick, how are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty well, sir. I'm a little busy. You and I both have a lot of irons in the fire, so to speak, here at Place to Be Nation. You know, lots of exciting projects coming up that you and I are both working on, and just a rather hectic time in the lives of the Hard-Traveling Fanboys.
That's right. We're working on projects that may not see the light of day for quite some time, but nevertheless, we're putting all the irons in the fire, as they say, or the irons in the fire, or the irons in the fire. Doing all of that for you, our loyal listeners. Okay, it's actually for us because we have fun doing this stuff, but it's also for you, the loyal listeners. And the not-so-loyal listeners, fair-weather listeners, we like you too. So, you are listening to a very special edition, and we say that every week, it seems, Nick, but a very special edition of the Hard-Traveling Fanboys, because we are going to be bringing you our exclusive review, because you've demanded it. The world has demanded it. Our review of the box office smash Wonder Woman, sweeping the nation, Nick. Sweeping the nation, and much like the Hard-Traveling Fanboys, it's a huge financial success.
Absolutely. It was a pretty big hit for Warner Brothers. Wound up grossing over $100 million, becoming the highest-grossing opening weekend for any film directed by a female in North American box office history. So, big things happening for Wonder Woman, and, outside of just the financial success, it's the first movie in the DCEU that's kind of been unanimously critically successful as well. I mean, enjoying a score of, I believe, 93% last I saw on Rotten Tomatoes. Not that that's the end-all, be-all for, the quality of the film, but it is something that studios like to hang their hat on as a positive critical response, and it's something that seemed to derail films like Batman v Superman and Suicide Squad in their, pre-release status previously.
Yeah, it's gotten very good response from the critics, and it's gotten very good response from the fans. Over $100 million at the box office thus far. On pace, certainly, to do some big numbers. And when you compare its budget to its box office numbers, it's probably going to end up being the most successful of the DCEU movies to this point. Most likely, as long as the business holds up. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves. But so we kind of approached this project with, I think it's fair to say, Nick, a little bit of trepidation after.
Oh, absolutely. After the events of the past year.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Suicide Squad.
Yeah, after. Yep. Yes?
I was waiting on you. We kept talking over each other.
Oh. My God, people are going to think there are audio issues, and there aren't any this week.
No. Just user errors. But
what else is new?
Yes. So, yeah, Suicide Squad left us with bad taste in mouth, as one Andrew Chandler Fraser Garner once noted. And honestly, Warner Brothers has not given us much reason to have faith in them to this point, as a movie-producing company anyway, when it comes to their DC line. So we both kind of, I think, approached this movie with lowered expectations compared to most people who were really excited about it. I was a little afraid to get excited about it. Even once the reviews started rolling in, yes, I breathed a bit of a sigh of relief because of the high scores, but even then I thought, I don't want to get my hopes too high because I've been let down so many times before. What were your thoughts going in, Nick?
Yeah, pretty much exactly that. I was, as I had said on these airwaves, I was in prove-it mode. Like, I had been burned by the DCEU one too many times, in my opinion, and I was not going to allow myself to get overly hyped for another of their films until they proved to me that they could make one that was at least, relatively popular with the general fan community. I'm someone who very much enjoys Man of Steel and who very much enjoys the ultimate cut of Batman v Superman, but I can acknowledge that both of those films are divisive. And I'm kind of tired of that. I understand that there for a while the thought process was, well, the DCEU is it's going for a different audience than the MCU and things like that. But what that leads to is division in your fandom, and that's not really good for anyone. And I was kind of wanting something that could bring us all together and just kind of leave us walking out of the theater, reveling in what an awesome movie we had just seen. And luckily, it seems that Wonder Woman has kind of set that trend.
Yes, so let's get right into it. Wonder Woman is directed by Patty Jenkins, who is probably most well known for her early 2000s film Monster, that was about a serial killer. It starred Charlize Theron, however you pronounce it, and this was kind of her big return to the big screen, and her first chance to really get a big budget superhero movie or a big budget movie of any kind. So this was a bit of an outside the box hire for DC in a way, but this is a movie that Patty Jenkins has been lobbying to make for a long, long time, and she finally got her chance to make this film and delivered in a big way, and we'll get to that in a minute. But Nick, how familiar were you with Patty Jenkins before Wonder Woman?
I mean, clearly I had seen Monster, being the I don't really know how to term this, but having the general interest in serial killers like I do, I've obviously seen Monster. Fan of that film, think it was very well done, and but I'm not really familiar with much else of what she's worked on since then, which is a gap of, I believe Monster came out in 2003, if I'm not mistaken, so almost a 15-year gap, a 14-year gap there between notable projects. So other than Monster, not really familiar with her much at all. I know that she was once attached to direct Thor: The Dark World, and wound up walking away from that film over at the MCU. One of the few directors who has actually walked away from an MCU project after being officially attached. So, other than her involvement with those two films, didn't really know a whole lot about her.
Gotcha. And as you know, folks, we're celebrating Wonder Woman month here at Place to Be Nation Pop, and we have talked before about how both Nick and I really have come to love Wonder Woman in the last year, thanks to DC Rebirth and the comic books from Greg Rucka, Nicola Scott, Liam Sharp.
Well, and also I would say that we had a general appreciation for the character based on the DC animated universe. Justice League Unlimited, various guest appearances on other shows as well. So I mean, while our appreciation for her comic book adventures is only developed in the last year, I think you and I both had a general appreciation for the character based on her history in animation.
Certainly. Shout out to Bruce Timm and all of those fine folks at the DC animated universe. But this film kind of bucks a lot of the traditions of Wonder Woman, in that traditionally Wonder Woman is a character that is tied closely to World War II. Interestingly, Patty Jenkins and Alan Heinberg, the writer, choose to go in a different direction and focus on an even earlier war than that, and they focus on World War I. As people who are, we like our canons, we like our comic book histories and all that. What did you make of this decision to kind of switch up things and go a different route with Diana's origin?
You're speaking in regards to the World War I placement, the time setting? Yeah, didn't really bother me. I think one of the things you have to consider is that we are living in a post-MCU world, and anything at this point that DC does that hews too closely to what the MCU has done is going to be accused of being some sort of a rip-off or a retread, even if that isn't necessarily the case based on the source material, because in most cases DC had probably gotten there first in the comics. But seeing as how Captain America: The First Avenger had so successfully done a World War II period piece, it kind of felt appropriate that Wonder Woman would seek to, do it a little bit differently. And so World War I also offered a lot of interesting historical comparisons as well. It's right around the time of the suffrage movement, so you have that kind of historical backdrop going around. And if you think about it, World War I kind of marks this weird, meeting point between an antiquated way of fighting wars and the technology-infused way of fighting war that we find today. By World War II, everything was about tanks and mechanized movement and the old trenches and whatnot. The trench warfare and complicated troop formations had largely, fallen by the wayside. And so it's this interesting meeting of traditional warriors and modern technology that kind of fits beautifully for having Wonder Woman thrown right into the middle of it. So I actually really enjoyed the World War I aspect. And plus, World War I in general is a time period that hasn't been really explored in film nearly as much as World War II, in my opinion. So I think it was just a little bit fresher area to mine.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I've made the argument for many years that we've had so many great war movies about World War II and about Vietnam and about the Civil War, but there are so many others that have not been mined. And World War I is one of them. World War I is a war that, compared to World War II, has almost been forgotten historically. People don't talk about it. People don't know as much about it. I don't know as much about it. I'll be honest. I remember very little about what I learned about it at school, but I don't know the details of it the way that I know the individual battles of World War II. So I think putting it in that setting, first of all, you're giving yourself a lot more leeway because people aren't as familiar with it, so you can fudge with the facts a little bit, and you can fudge with the surroundings a little bit more than you could with World War II. And I also think that by putting it in World War I, it also muddies the waters a little bit, because everybody knows about World War II who the good guys were and who the bad guys were. It's pretty obvious when you look at it on face value. World War I is a little more vague. It's a little more odd. It's, what are they fighting for? Why are they fighting this? And there's a lot more complicated war, I think, at least on the surface. And I think putting Diana in that situation is great because she's a character who is all about humanity, fighting for peace, for love, for hope, and putting her in a situation where it's the most violent war that had happened in to that point, globally. And putting her in that environment, you're instantly creating an interesting and intriguing conflict for her character, of the dichotomy of going from the ultimate peace of Paradise Island to this battlefield where everybody hates each other and is hurting each other, and there's nothing she can do about it. So I love the setting of World War I. I thought it was a really cool move that doesn't fundamentally change anything about the character. That's the thing here. It's a change to the canon, but it changes nothing fundamentally about her character.
Absolutely. I mean, really the important thing is that she grows up on Paradise Island or Themyscira and eventually makes her way into man's world to come to the aid of humanity in general. And really the time frame in which she does that ultimately isn't all that important, I would argue.
Right. And they did a really good job of playing with the social mores of that time, of playing with the expectations, of playing with the world at that time. Very much of the post-industrial revolution. So London is a smog-filled mess. It's completely and starkly in contrast to what you see on Themyscira at the beginning of the movie, which is bright and colorful. And that's something that I want to mention, Nick. We're getting into this movie starts, of course, with Diana's origins. We're not going to give a plot summary, basically, because you need to go out and see this movie if you haven't. But it starts on Themyscira. I don't think that's a shock to anybody. It tells you about Diana's youth and a little bit about her origins. And that was one of the first things I noticed, that this film is more colorful than, maybe not more colorful, but brighter than any movie we've seen yet in the DC Extended Universe.
Absolutely would agree, and I would argue it was better for it. I'm all for what I call the Zack Snyder color palette. I'm not all for any color palette as the only color palette by which an entire universe is going to be developed. Zack Snyder wants to make his movies in that tone, that's fine, but I think that the DCEU in general needs to have a variety of color palettes that are utilized when it comes to the cinematography, because otherwise everything has this somewhat bleary sameness that isn't for everyone, and it kind of winds up being forced upon films like Wonder Woman or like an Aquaman or like a Flash that aren't necessarily lending themselves to that visual approach.
Color does matter in a film. It's a big aspect if you're making a color picture at this point. It's because you think back to it of when you go outside and it's dark and it's dreary, it puts you in a certain mood if you're around it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And likewise, if you go out and it's bright and it's sunny, you and I hate it because it's incredibly hot and we hate the heat and we're overweight and we sweat. But
yes,
most people would probably say, hey, what a great day, it's bright and sunny out. So it does make a difference.
And those people would be wrong, Greg.
Yes, absolutely, unequivocally. The heat can go suck it, the sun can go suck it. But nevertheless, it makes a difference in how you feel. It makes a difference in your outlook on life. So naturally, if you go and you see a movie about a dark character or a movie that wants to put you in kind of that, emotionally fragile state, it's going to be a little darker. But a movie like Wonder Woman should not be about an emotional fragile state. It should be about hope. It should be about inspiration and heroism. And I think that's where those bright colors come in, because we're on Themyscira at the beginning of this movie. It's gorgeous. The landscape is gorgeous. The entire way that the world appears to you, it does look like paradise. And it's this contrast to what you see later in the film. This is what Diana grows up with. She grows up in this bright, sunny paradise where there's beauty everywhere and everything is good and wholesome and kind. And then she goes out into the world as the movie progresses into quote-unquote man's world, and she sees how dark and depressing and bleary and dreary the rest of the world is, and it creates this awesome dichotomy, and it puts you into her shoes and makes you empathetic with her, of seeing, wow, she really is going through all this for the very first time. Like, she's never seen smog before. She's never seen guns before. She's never seen all of these things that are
children
dark,
or the things that are inherently good either about the world. I mean, things like children or ice cream in a notable example from the film.
Yes, and that's the other thing, is that it's this protective paradise, but so she doesn't know the bad about the world, but you're right, she also doesn't know the good about the world. Children, ice cream, like you mentioned, love, it just...
Watches.
Watches, yes, she's unaware of watches. Penises, of course.
Yes, penises. Sweet Jesus, it's a penis.
So, I thought that opening the movie in such a way was a good choice, an obvious choice, but a really good one, and one that should have been made, because I think it's important anytime you're telling Wonder Woman's story to show where she came from, to explain why she is the way that she is, and also to explain how she's different from those that she shares that sisterhood with, because she's not like the rest of them. I don't know that the rest of them could adapt as well as she does as the movie progresses, but yet she has this through point that the audience can follow her from and understand why she makes the choices that she makes and why she believes the things that she makes. And part of that, a large part of that, is tied into her relationship with her protective mother, Hippolyta. Nick, talk a little bit about the Amazons in general in this movie and the Themyscira section, and also about the way that the Hippolyta and Diana relationship was realized here. We don't want to obviously spoil things, but what were your impressions of how that all went down?
I absolutely loved the Hippolyta and Diana relationship in this film. The closest comparison, and the one that I think lends itself naturally in terms of a in terms of a comic book movie is probably Thor and Odin. And one thing that I love about this film, and I don't want to give too much away here, but typically when you're dealing with a character like Odin or another male ruler, they are typically portrayed and are portrayed in the Thor films as very, as their will is the law, and very stubborn and very unwilling to see the error of their ways. In this film, Diana and Hippolyta not once but twice have conflict with one another. Hippolyta makes a ruling and later comes back and says, "You know what? On second thought, I'm wrong. This is not the way we should be doing this. This is what you need to do. This is what needs to happen." And I just thought that was a cool juxtaposition of showing how perhaps, men can sometimes lose sight of reason inside of being right. And I love the way they kind of worked that in. I also thought that just in terms of a mother-daughter relationship between the two, there was so much feeling there and so much love. I loved the way that, it was clear that Diana challenged Hippolyta, and yet it never crossed the line of being disrespectful on either side. They obviously had their push and pull, but at the end of the day, they deeply, deeply cared for one another.
Yeah.
Outside of just Hippolyta. Go ahead, Greg.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, yeah, it's disagreement, and they managed to disagree furiously with one another, and yet you never doubt the fact that they love each other, and that's a tough dichotomy to pull off in a movie.
It really is, yeah. And then on the topic of the other Amazons, I thought the whole culture of Themyscira, while it wasn't in the movie quite long enough for my taste, I think we could have used just a little bit more Themyscira, maybe 10 more minutes maybe. I loved what I saw. I thought the warrior culture of the island was portrayed very well, showing them in training. I thought the set design, the way the island was shot, their costume designs, I thought all of that was great. Robin Wright Penn as Antiope, I believe is the way they pronounced her name in the film, as the Amazon trainer. I thought she was really, really great and had a great little chemistry there with Hippolyta as well. So yeah, pretty much all the Amazon stuff in this movie really, really worked for me in a big way.
Yes, I was going to mention her. I really enjoyed all of the Amazon stuff as well. I also agree that I could have stood for a little bit more of it. Hopefully we'll get more of that in the sequel. But yeah, everybody was great here.
I believe I caught a glimpse of Themyscira in the Justice League trailer. So fingers crossed on that one.
Absolutely. Yes, you mentioned Robin Wright as General Antiope. She was outstanding, and what I mentioned her specifically because the movie did something very clever, in my opinion. At least it was clever to me, because the way that they were establishing her character and the fact that she seemed to be somebody who thrives on war, I was convinced the heel turn was coming. I thought from the minute she was talking about how much she wanted war, even though Hippolyta didn't want any war coming to the island, I thought eventually it would be that kind of tropish story of where the loyal soldier sells out the queen because she thinks the queen is past her time or whatever. And I'm so glad they didn't do that. Instead, they actually showed Antiope and the queen disagreeing, and the queen finally coming to see things Antiope's way. And it created this almost surrogate mother for Diana in addition to her real mother. And it showed how these Amazons are different from us, and that they all care for one another. They all raise each other. They all look out for each other. And it was such a well-done aspect of the film. I want to throw a special shout-out to Connie Nielsen as Hippolyta. She was incredible. There's a scene in which Diana leaves Themyscira. That's not giving too much away, I don't think. And that scene is one of my favorites in the movie. Even when the movie was over and all the rest of it had gone by, that stood out to me as one of the very best scenes because of the love that came across between mother and daughter. And outstanding acting, great writing, and outstanding direction led to a phenomenal scene. What did you make of her performance as Hippolyta?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, that she was able to get across the fact that she and Diana, while they have their differences, clearly care deeply for one another. Like you said, same thing with Antiope. So yeah, not really a whole lot to add, but I thought she was great, man. For what little she was in the film, she was outstanding, and I'm hoping that again we'll get to see more of her in future DCEU installments.
Absolutely. So the transition into Man's World takes place largely through the character of Steve Trevor, and I'm going to save our talk about Wonder Woman herself for a little bit later in this discussion, but I would argue that other than Diana herself, the most essential character in this movie to make it work was going to be Steve Trevor. And Chris Pine, who's a guy that we have a lot of love for through his turn in the Star Trek movies and our continual efforts to get him to play Hal Jordan in a Green Lantern movie, he was cast as Steve Trevor here. And to make a long story short, I can't think of any other way to put this except he absolutely destroyed it as Steve Trevor. Pine, from the minute minute he steps on screen, owns it and puts in a version of Steve Trevor that instantly is the best version of Steve Trevor.
Yeah, he was pretty much perfect. Brought menace to the role when he needed to be menacing, brought heroism to the role when he needed to be heroic, brought comedy to the role when he needed to be comedic. He kind of just was the movie's all-around utility player. Anytime the movie needed someone other than Diana to step up and have a moment or a line or take over a scene, it was him. Gal Gadot, as you said, we'll get into her in a minute, and she was fantastic as Wonder Woman, no doubt about it, but Steve Trevor absolutely held his own and never got overshadowed by her at any moment of the film, in my opinion. I thought, like you said, he was very important because for a film that relies so heavily on a female protagonist, you were going to need a strong male lead as well there to keep some men who aren't interested in watching, who are less interested in watching females do things, hooked in. And I thought Chris Pine and Steve Trevor did exactly that.
If there's one thing that we like to do here on the show, it's compare things to wrestling. And my wrestling comparison for this is if Diana is your Stone Cold, Steve Trevor is your Rock in this movie. I think they need.
Now I don't think Stone Cold and The Rock ever did some of the things that Diana and Steve Trevor did.
I challenge you to watch that segment, The Rock and Stone Cold sing off, and you tell me there weren't some sparks flying there, mister.
Oh.
What does that mean, you little funny?
Funny.
Oh, God. November 2001. It was a good time. In wrestling, anyway.
Yes.
Like you said, like I was saying, he is the Rock to her Stone Cold in terms of the importance of the movie, because one doesn't work quite as well without the other. And Diana was going to be great regardless. Steve would be great in his own movie. But together, there's just this chemistry. And not just the romantic chemistry, because the romantic chemistry is off the charts. They pull off a relationship in a comic book movie as well as any I've ever seen. And we'll touch on that again a little bit later. But what Pine brings to the role, I'm glad you mentioned comedy, because I was going to say absolutely perfect in that role. He is the primary source of comic relief in this film. He humanizes it. He brings in this more worldly perspective to Diana, who's this naive, childlike figure going out into the world. Steve is this grizzled guy who's been around and seen and done it all, and is just hilarious. His physical comedy was reminiscent of something like Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight or Robert Downey Jr. in the first Iron Man, where they just have this natural sense of physical comedy. His wittiness, his ability to deliver these lines with such fluidity and quickness that it seems so natural was perfect. And just his understanding of how to portray a real dude, like not a macho guy, not a caricature, not a wimpy guy, but just somebody who's very complicated, who is a strong man, who is a fighter, but who also is completely overshadowed by this woman who is the most incredible creature he's ever seen and been around, and who is pretty much better at everything than him, and he acknowledges that, and he embraces that, and he loves her for it, and it's just remarkable to watch. Incredible performance from Pine.
Absolutely.
So they go into the real world, so to speak, and along the way you get the kind of plot of the film where Diana is trying to undo what she believes is a plot from Ares, who is coming back to bring war to the world and basically destroy the world. And meanwhile, Trevor is trying to perform his mission as a spy to help unseat the German army and stop their weapons, their gas weapons that are being developed by Dr. Poison, which is Isabelle Marou, a longtime comic book character that I honestly don't know much about in the comics. So I'll just say I thought she was really creepy in this movie and well portrayed by the actress Elena Anaya. Dr. Poison is a character, Nick, I don't know if you know anything about her. I do not, but thought she was pulled off.
I believe she actually makes an appearance here in the recent Rebirth run by Greg Rucka, so I knew the smallest amount about her.
So, yeah. What did you think of her in the movie?
Great. I mean, she was creepy, and I loved the way that, not to get too deep into it or in whatnot, but oftentimes films will give you reasons to empathize with villains, and that's great a lot of the time, but sometimes you just want a villain who's just bad, who is just a bad, evil person, and you don't really want to feel bad for him. And there's a key moment near the end of the movie that only works because they haven't attempted to make you empathize with her throughout, and so I actually enjoyed the fact that she's just an evil bitch, and there's no other way to put it.
I know exactly the scene you're referring to. You're right. That scene only works if there hasn't been that redemptive moment for her earlier in the film. And it shows you in one scene with almost no dialogue, what Diana is all about as a character. Huge, key, important scene. But along the way, we also meet what we believe, for most of the movie, to be the primary villain, Eric Ludendorff, who is played by Danny Huston. He is an ambitious general in the German army and seems to be almost a proto-Hitler of sorts, not in terms of singling out a particular race of people for extermination, but somebody who seems intent on finding more and more ways to hurt and kill the quote-unquote enemy, that is, anyone who isn't fighting for his army. Pretty interesting character here, I thought. A little one-dimensional, admittedly, but Danny Huston played him well. There's an ongoing subplot involving some sort of a supplemental material, gas thing that he can breathe in, that I was a little shaky on. But Nick, what did you make about this character Ludendorff? He was. If I had to pick out kind of a weakness in the movie, I thought this character, not the fault of the actor, but I thought the character was a little on the shallow side. What did you think?
Yeah, I would agree. He was fine, but nothing to write home about. Nothing remarkable in any way, shape, form, or fashion. He was just, generic evil general number 7, essentially.
God, number 7. Wow. I wonder what the other 6 did. They had an encounter with Mr. Tex Ferguson or Zex Ferguson. Maybe in the Watts territory.
Well, no. They did all of the flips and none of the selling.
Nevertheless, he was kind of the weak point. But we also got several other characters along the way. Steve Trevor's team that he assembles consists of Samir, Charlie, and Chief. Now, these are guys that are all from different ethnic backgrounds. One of them is Scottish. One of them is Native American. They're all from different backgrounds and ethnicities. And I think the point of this is to show that this war is affecting people from all different backgrounds. Every race is being affected by this war. And when Diana fights for them, she's fighting for everyone. She's not just fighting for people who look like her or people who look like Steve Trevor. She's fighting for everyone. What did you make of this group? I thought there was some pretty good comic relief in there, and some surprisingly emotional moments with Charlie, and also with the Chief there.
Yeah, loved all of them. I would say that I probably enjoyed Samir and Charlie a little bit more, just because of the comedic element they brought to the film. But I will agree that there is a key dramatic scene there with Chief that kind of brings home the idea that Diana isn't fighting for one particular nation or people, but rather for humanity in general. So I understand why he was there and the role he served in the plot. But of the three, I enjoyed all three. Thought the team was great. But like I said, Samir and Charlie kind of brought it home with the comedy for me.
Yes, agreed with that for sure. There's also an actor from the Harry Potter films, which I know very little to nothing about. I'd never heard of him before this movie, really. I'd seen him in a few things probably, but not Harry Potter. Named Remus Lupin, and he plays a pretty.
Well, that's the character from Harry Potter's name.
That's the character. You're right. I was reading his Wikipedia page. So David Thewlis is the actor's name. I know nothing about that character that he played in Harry Potter, but he does have that Harry Potter tie, which I know is exciting to a lot of people. And he plays the character of Sir Patrick Morgan. What did you make of Thewlis's job in this movie?
He did a good job. He was, kind of portraying the wise old, sagely veteran to the team and giving them some much-needed advice, and I don't really want to say too much else.
He sort of reminded me for a lot of the movie of Mike Myers in Inglourious Basterds, if anyone remembers that brief role that he had there. We're going through most of the... I haven't even mentioned another key part of the movie, who isn't in the movie a lot, but when she's there, she makes it count, and that's Lucy Davis as Etta Candy, who is Steve Trevor's loyal secretary, and ends up befriending Diana. We're not getting into Donna yet. Donna Troy's another movie for another time.
That'll be an entire movie just explaining her origin.
Yes, and that will actually probably make things clearer for a lot of comic book readers, I think.
So that's it.
Exactly. That's going to be that's going to be how it's going to go. Is the movie is going to end up defining her origin once and for all, because the comics can never make up their damn mind what her origin is. So,
and the movie will of course be written and directed by our good friend Jeremy Reynolds. And it will be titled "It's Not That Complicated: The Donna Troy Story."
And there's actually not going to be any action in the movie. It's just going to be Jeremy with a pointer pointing at a chalkboard where he has drawn out a diagram.
A whiteboard,
explaining,
and drawing with an expo marker. Exactly.
At the end of the movie, whoever's been cast as Donna Troy will walk onto the screen and say, "I'm Donna Troy," and then the movie ends.
Yes.
And that's how you hook them for the sequel. But no, Etta Candy, Lucy Davis's Etta Candy, added some comedic flavor to it, but I didn't think she went too over the top. I didn't think she hammed it up. She added some nice little comedy there with trying to help accommodate, would you say, Diana to some of the rather restrictive social mores of the 19-teens.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, liked those scenes a great deal, but I agree with you. She wasn't there too much, and when she was there, she didn't try to pull. I was kind of worried based on the trailers that she would just be playing her as over the top, flustered British lady all the time, but that's not what we got at all, which was for the best.
Agreed. And I guess we've kind of gone through all the other major characters. Is that correct? Except for one, of course, standout. Can you think of anyone else we haven't addressed?
Not that I can think of, no.
Well, that only leaves one, and that leaves the most important one of all, and that is Gal Gadot, or Gal Gadot. I'm not sure how to pronounce it necessarily. I'm going to go with
I believe it's Gadot.
As Diana Prince, a.k.a. Wonder Woman. And I'm going to let you go first on this one, Nick, and tell the people your impressions of her portrayal of Diana and what you thought about Diana in the film.
Man, that's a quite a loaded topic, because there are so many different ways you could take it, and so many different things you could say, and all of them are positive. All of them are glowingly positive. Needless to say, this was as fine a performance in a superhero film as you are ever likely to see. And yes, that includes even the Robert Downey Jr.'s and Heath Ledgers of the world. Now, granted, a different kind of portrayal. To me, I think this is the closest that anyone has come in almost 40 years to replicating the type of performance that Christopher Reeve gave in the first Superman film. It is a performance in which Gal Gadot is willing to show an earnestness and a sincerity that isn't really present in modern day superhero movies anymore. I mean, again, I'm a huge fan of Man of Steel, but one of the biggest complaints about Man of Steel from a lot of longtime Superman fans is that it was missing that sense of sincerity and that sense of hope that the old Donner Chris Reeve movies had, and Gadot brings that in spades here. I think she embodies the character in such a massive way that it is difficult for me at this point, and granted, I know we're only 2 films into her portrayal, but it's already difficult for me to see envisioning anyone else as Wonder Woman in the foreseeable future. She absolutely owns this role. She owns, like I said, the personification of the role. She owns the physicality of the role. She was a former member of the Israeli army, and that absolutely comes through in the action scenes in this film, where she is absolutely outstanding. She just has a presence the entire time that is unlike anything we've seen in superhero cinema in such a long, long time. I could go on and on, but suffice it to say, she is instantly probably, one of the top 5 superhero portrayals of all time, in my opinion.
You said it perfect, Bubba. And when you talked about that earnestness, the only modern example I can think of would be Chris Evans as Captain America.
That's a great example that I blanked on. Good example.
That earnestness, that sincerity, that hope, that fact that if anyone else was trying to play this character, it might come off as corny or it might come off as cheesy, but it never does with her. It's the same thing with Christopher Reeve and Chris Evans that we've always talked about, where I remember when I was a kid and the first time I saw him on screen, I didn't think, hey, that's an actor playing Superman. I thought, that's Superman. And that's exactly what I thought with Gal, and that doesn't happen all the time, or very often even, where I instantly, the moment she stepped onto screen, I said, oh my God, that's Wonder Woman. And like you said, Nick, it's to the point where I can't imagine anyone else playing her, because she's not playing Wonder Woman. She is Wonder Woman, if that makes sense. It's Robert Downey Jr., it's Heath Ledger, it's Chris Evans, it's Christopher Reeve, and that's the one that when we left the theater, Nick, both of us, you and I both, said it at the same time, it's Christopher Reeve. And you don't have that very often, ever. It's generational. And the fact that you leave the movie and you're inspired by her, and you're actually remembering what it's like to be a kid again and to read a superhero comic for the first time. And that's what all these audiences are having when they leave this film, because she has that humanity that you talked about, that earnestness, that fierceness in the action scenes, that believability. When you look in her eyes, she believes what she's saying. And I can't tell you how hard it is in today's society where everybody is cynical. We're all cynical. We're all sarcastic. We're all ironic. We're all self-deprecating. We all put up these shields around us. And so we're conditioned to want to make fun of things, to want to think that sincerity and honesty and goodness is lame and cheesy and corny. And in this movie, she is so good at what she does, and she is so convincing that she makes you believe, if only for those 2 hours, that hope is good, that goodness is good, and that it's not cheesy, and that it's not corny, and that it's cool to love people, and it's cool to be nice to people, and it's cool to not think that you have to go around with this shield around you all the time, and that you can just be yourself. And that is, if that's not what Diana's about, I don't know. That's what Wonder Woman is. That is her character, and I cannot adequately express how wonderfully Gal portrays all of those characteristics in a film where it would be very easy to go the other direction with it, or to have your tongue in your cheek the whole time. Doesn't happen here. Just an incredible performance by Gal Gadot.
Absolutely.
So all of these performances are awesome. We've talked a little bit about the plot. It's interesting because the plot goes along, and it's really not solved in the way the issues are not solved in the way that you might think a traditional superhero movie would be solved. Yes, you have your big fight at the end, but the way that Diana wins is not through necessarily using her fists, it's by using her ideals. And while there were some aspects here and there that I think we'll talk about when we get to the action scenes that may not have been perfect, it was such a refreshing change, wasn't it, from the usual way that these superhero movies resolve themselves?
To a certain extent, yeah. Like, in terms of the way that she won the final fight, but I will agree with a little bit of the criticism. I think that the final action scene does lend itself a little bit to a little bit of a formulaic approach, in that it's kind of reduced to a big CGI battle at the end, which I get. I get the need for, I understand it, I didn't hate it. I thought it was fairly well done as far as those things go, but that was the part of the movie to me that felt probably the most like a typical superhero movie as compared to the rest of it.
Yeah, no, I can agree with that, but I don't think that we've seen too many movies. What it reminded me of is, and I had issues with the CGI in that last scene as well. It was a little shaky at times, and the fight wasn't particularly inventive, but I think the point of it being that it's Diana's ideals that end up winning the fight is different. It reminded me of those Dan Abnett Aquaman comics that we talk about from time to time on the show, Nick, in that it was so different that Abnett crafted a superhero story that really wasn't about fighting, that fighting was considered a last resort, which is almost never the case in superhero comics by their nature. And I really liked that idea of Diana refusing to give in to her warrior mentality and choosing to believe in humanity. Was really cool. But along the way, we also got some other fight scenes. I agree with you that fight scene was not the best, and there were a couple of CGI moments here and there that maybe weren't the strongest in the world, but there are a few action scenes in there that I thought were really spectacular. The one that everyone's talking about is just called No Man's Land, and that is, without getting into too much of the movie, that is probably, for a lot of people, the standout scene in the movie. This was a chance to see Diana really in action for the first time as Wonder Woman, and it was spectacular. There's also a great scene with her destroying a building and taking out some bad guys, and also Steve Trevor and his team simultaneously doing some damage of their own. What did you make of that scene, and what did you make of the action in general in the film?
The action in general was great. Throw a little shout out as well to the shootout on the beach that takes place on Themyscira, where the German army finds Themyscira and leads to a shootout with the Amazons. I thought that was really well done, kind of showing that juxtaposition between the way the Amazons fight and the way man's world fights, and kind of interesting showcasing those two. Thought it was really, really well shot, and the cinematography on it was great. The colors were great. Everything.
A showcase of the Immortals.
Almost. Everything kind of popped in that scene. Really worked for me in a big way. But yeah, like you said, I mean, No Man's Land stands out as not just the premier action scene in this film, but one of the premier action scenes in comic book films in general, I would argue. Just because it was so cool to finally, after all these years, see a female superhero up there kicking ass in such a cool way. And make no mistake about it, that action scene was absolutely badass in every way, shape, form, and fashion. I mean, from the simplistic beginning of her just trying to advance from one side of a field to another, and then going right into the assault on the village, I thought the entire sequence there, for the 5 or 10 minutes that it was just exceptionally well done. And big props to Patty Jenkins, whoever did the choreography on that, and of course Gal Gadot doing some of the heavy lifting. So big props to everybody involved with that.
Yeah, it was an incredible scene, and there were several throughout this movie, as you pointed out, really good action scenes. I think that the last scene was a little lackluster. Some of the CGI along the way in the movie was not the best. But I think overall, this movie did a better job than most comic book movies of capturing that action. And like you said, No Man's Land is going to go down as probably one of the defining action scenes of this generation, I would think. And particularly within the superhero genre, something that I've talked about before. I think most superhero movies ultimately do themselves a disservice when it comes to their action scenes. There are obvious exceptions here and there. Civil War, for instance, Winter Soldier, anything the Russo brothers direct, basically. By and large, and the new Guardians of the Galaxy, I thought, had some really good action scenes in it. But by and large, superhero films, particularly from Marvel and DC, don't tend to be terribly inventive in that regard. So I was really happy to see how into it they got with these action scenes, and also how awesome and badass it made Wonder Woman look. Obviously, it helps when you have a real badass like Gal Gadot playing the character, but they really got across how fierce Wonder Woman can be in combat. And that brings me to my next point. We should probably talk about our theater experience with this, Nick. Both of us have only seen it once. We saw it together this past weekend, the big group. And it was so cool to have hear such a unanimously positive reception leaving the theater, and also to hear during the movie so many women and girls as excited during this movie as we often get. Remember, Nick, when we were watching Avengers: Age of Ultron, and how we were just giddy the whole time, for lack of a better term, at all these things that we never thought we'd see on the big screen?
Absolutely, yeah.
And this was that for so many people. And I thought that was... I'm always a mark for that. I remember, even as much as people trash it, and deservedly so in many cases, I'll never forget when I was watching Superman Returns at the theater, and the little kid behind me was living and dying on every single thing that Superman was doing. If Superman was flying around and happy, he was happy. If Superman was in trouble, he was upset. And it was like a movie that can have that emotional effect on somebody. I'm always gonna at least have some level of respect for it. And so to see the impact this movie is having was really cool. Nick, what did you make of the reaction in the theater to it? And just in general, what did you think was the general reception overall, maybe outside of our friends group, or outside of our traditional superhero movie friends group that we have?
Yeah, it was obviously a very positive experience for everybody in the theater. I'll give you a perfect example. My wife was absolutely fired up. She came out to see it with us, and she goes to see all these with me and typically enjoys them. Almost always enjoys them less than I do, which is predictable. But this is the first one where, as much as I enjoyed it, after it was over, she was like, "Oh, that was awesome." She was like, "That was amazing." She thinks it's one of the best superhero movies ever made, and it was just interesting to see that kind of response. And it's one of those things that, Greg, I don't know that we'll ever truly be able to understand how it played to people of that gender, because we've been catered to in this genre for so many years that I don't think we're ever going to know that feeling of finally. Yep. It's just one of those things, and it's so cool that it finally happened, even if it is years too late.
It's way overdue that they get a movie like this. And yes, before anyone tweets us or texts us or emails us, yes, I'm aware of Elektra and Catwoman and Supergirl. They don't count. This is the first legit one that women have gotten. Like, with this kind of budget, with this kind of effort put into making it, that we've been getting since we were kids. We've been spoiled our whole lives. Even we went through a drought in the 90s, but we got, we had the Donner Supermans, and we had the Keaton, the Burton Batman, and then, of course, we had even Blade and the X-Men movies, and all of this was catered to us. Now there's something that is catered to women as well, and I think it's wonderful, and it's awesome, and it's overdue. And Marvel, please get off your asses and make a Black Widow movie. There's no excuse for not making one. Quit saying it's not the right time. Quit saying the audience isn't there. The audience is there. They're waiting. They will watch these movies. This proves it. Go out there and make these movies for them.
Absolutely.
And DC as well should make more of them. I think we got a few coming our way, though, with Harley.
Oh, and I think there's no doubt. I don't think there's any doubt that a Wonder Woman sequel is going to be fast-tracked. As we all know, the Joss Whedon Batgirl is coming. Gotham City Sirens, which is going to be, female-led. So you got a variety of these coming down the track, so to speak.
So real quick, Nick, what are you thinking for the Wonder Woman sequel? What do you want to see?
Cheetah. I want to see modern times, and I either want to see Cheetah, or at the very least, I want to see Barbara and Minerva introduced, and see her and Diana develop a friendship before she becomes Cheetah in a potential third movie. So those would be the two.
To extrapolate from that, Nick, I'm assuming that at the end of the movie, you want Cheetah to put on a yellow power ring for unexplained reasons.
Yeah, for no adequately explained reason. Not just put on a yellow power ring, but I want there to be a yellow power ring in the context of the film that they think about using. They decide not to. They win the big climactic at the battle at the end without using the yellow power ring, and then she decides to put it on anyway, even though she's just demonstrated that she doesn't really need it. That's what I want to happen.
To me, that makes perfect sense. I'm
perfect sense.
That makes perfect sense. I like that. I like all of that. What I'm going to say from a sequel is kind of more of the same, and maybe even a little bit more of that exploration of Themyscira and some of the history and backstory of Themyscira. And also, and I know it's unlikely because, I don't want to go into that because it'll spoil the movie, but I want to see some more of the dynamic that we saw in this movie, particularly the love story, because we didn't even really talk about that yet, but I think the romance between Steve and Diana was extraordinary, to the point that I would go so far as to say it may be my favorite on-screen romance in a superhero movie. I'm trying to think of an example of one that I liked better, and off the top of my head, I'm having trouble with it. I really liked Bruce Wayne and Selena Kyle in The Dark Knight Rises. I really liked Pepper Potts and Tony Stark in the MCU. I can't really, off the top of my head, I can't really think of one that I liked as much as I liked this one.
I'd have to give that some thought.
Yeah, I would too. I'd have to really go back and study it.
Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone as Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy.
Great. No doubt. Yeah, that's a good choice. I still think I like this one a little bit more, but that one was really good. No doubt about that. I forgot about them because of the movie that they were in, but they had incredible chemistry, no doubt. Nevertheless, if you can't tell, folks, we loved this movie. We really, really enjoyed it. This is that home run that we've been waiting for from the DCEU, I think, since the beginning. And both of us are big Man of Steel fans and apologists. And that's another podcast for another time. But I think this is that, like I said, home run that we've been waiting for. Nick, obviously, we're both recommending the movie, so there's no point even getting to that part here. I don't think I'm telling tales out of skew there. But has this changed your perception of the DCEU at all? And if so, why? If not, why?
I will say it has slightly in terms of the positive, and the reason it's slightly instead of overwhelmingly is because I remain extremely underwhelmed and trepidatious about Justice League based on the footage we've seen and based on the general look of the movie that concerns me. I still feel like the look of the movie and the course correction and tone they have gone with are going to feel at odds with one another, and it's going to wind up taking me out of the film. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that they've done some things to mitigate concerns like that. But I still remain, very, very worried. So I'll say right now it's a slight uptick, but I think it portends good things for the future if Warner Brothers can maintain its nerve if Justice League does underperform. If they can move through that, this provides some hope for films like Aquaman or, Gotham City Sirens, God help me, or Batgirl, or things of that nature. It provides a brighter picture, because this was the first film that Jeff Johns was kind of heavily involved with, and so let's hope that this portends greater things to come.
Yeah, and I'm kind of like that too. I'm like you. I'm still underwhelmed by the Justice League trailers. So we'll see how it turns out. I do think that this did definitely set the bar higher and make me hope and realize that they are capable of more. Because Zack Snyder helped contribute to this story. He is one of the 3 people listed as being responsible for this story of this movie. And the screenplay was written by Alan Heinberg, as I mentioned, a longtime comic book writer, Wonder Woman writer, who did a wonderful job. But it shows that the ideas are there, potentially. It's just executing them, necessarily. And I think that this movie shows me that it can be done. I still remain very optimistic about Aquaman. Everything that comes out about that looks awesome. And, with Jeff Johns as a decision maker, at the very least, this movie makes me feel like the people in charge get the characters now and understand what sets them apart from everyone else that's come before and everybody at the competition. That's one thing that we talked about with Logan a couple months ago and with Guardians of the Galaxy just last month. The importance of variety and uniqueness, because nobody is going to want to watch superhero movies if the characters are all alike, if they're all the same. And I think by laying out your different characters that all have distinctive personalities and distinctive quirks and distinctive vices and strengths and weaknesses the way that Marvel has with their Avengers characters, that bodes well for DC going forward. And now we've got one with Diana who has a real hook to her in that she is really unlike any character that we've seen in quite some time on the big screen.
Yep, you said it perfect, Bubba.
Back it! With all that being said, folks, what did you think of Wonder Woman? If you haven't seen it, please just take a chance on it and go out and see it as soon as you can. And once you see it, let us know what your thoughts were on the movie. Tweet us. I am at gphillips8652 on Twitter. He is on Twitter at NickDuke87. Let us know your thoughts. We also have email addresses: gregp@placetobenation.com, nickd@placetobenation.com. And of course, we would love for you to join the Place to Be Nation Comics Facebook page. Just type in Place to Be Nation Comics in your search bar. Click on our group. Join us. We'll let you in, and we'll have some great conversation about Wonder Woman. The strengths, the weaknesses, what you'd like to see in a sequel, what you want going forward. And in the meantime, we've got another half of the show to go. We got reading and watching, we got the rundown, and we got all of that after this commercial break.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
Hey, pro wrestling announcer Kevin Kelly here. I want to make sure you are all subscribed to all the great feeds here at Place to Be Nation. It's really easy to do. Just head to iTunes or your preferred podcatcher app today and search and subscribe to the Place to Be Nation wrestling feed, which, of course, includes the full archives of The Kevin Kelly Show, the Place to Be Nation pod feed, and the Pro Wrestling Only feed. Subscribe, listen, and then rate us and leave feedback today. And be sure to give Justin your true thoughts. I mean, don't hold back. After all, he is kind of a jerk. Just listen to Scott.
Place to Be Nation's JT Rosero here, and I want to let you know that we have a ton of great podcasts available to you on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and PlayStation.com, and we now offer them to you on 2 great feeds. On the Place to Be Nation wrestling feed, you can check out Scott Criscolo and me on the Mothership, the Place to Be podcast, with our famous Vintage Vault pay-per-view reviews. PTBN also covers current day wrestling with clotheslines and headlines, main event, Lucha Afterground, and our monthly pay-per-view reaction shows. And we relive wrestling's past with our monthly pay-per-view rewind series led by Ben Morse. The Our Vantage Point podcast, which features a potpourri-style look at wrestling history, and Survey Says, a fun look back at the good, bad, and ugly of WCW. And on our very popular Place to Be Nation Pop podcast feed, we offer such great shows as the Glenn Butler podcast, Our Spectacular, Rank and File, PTBN Dadcast, NBA Team, and Lucha Undead, as well as a veritable podcast heaven for comics fans with Hard-Traveling Fanboys, Sellers Points, Todd Weber's Conversations, Geek and Sassy, and the Imaginary Stories. You can find all these current shows plus archives of our past podcasts, including The Kevin Kelly Show, as well by subscribing to both feeds on iTunes. And while there, be sure to rate and leave feedback as well. All these shows, plus others, available at PlayStation.com, where we cover pro wrestling, sports, movies, comics, plus tournaments, and more. Be sure to support our site by using PlayStation.com/Amazon when doing your online shopping, and download our free PTB Vintage Vault Refresh ebooks via the links on our site. We also want to thank our friends at Bonehead's Wing Bar in West Warwick, Rhode Island, and Fall River, Massachusetts, thehistoryofwrestling.com, and Scott Keith's Blog of Doom. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Tumblr as well. PlaceToBeNation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Pro Wrestling Only Podcast Network. Subscribe on iTunes or on Android with your favorite podcast app. Established in 2013, the Pro Wrestling Only Podcast Network is committed to providing unique takes on the rich and diverse medium of professional wrestling, focusing on its history and global impact, but also exploring the vibrant contemporary scene. The roll call includes Space City, an NWA on-demand podcast. This Week in Wrestling, Stacey and Elliott's Bogus Journey, the Super Apuestas podcast, the Military Industrial Suplex, Strong Style History, Pure Paris, and Psychology is Dead. Also, from the archives, the full catalog of great shows that provided a fresh look at classic wrestling, including Where the Big Boys Play, Titans of Wrestling, Tag Teams Back Again, Letters from Kayfabe, Wrestling Culture, Pro Wrestling Super Show, Goodwill Wrestling, and many, many others. Pro Wrestling Only Podcast Network. Only the best.
Yo, General, put away that gun. Hey, you're no general. You're...
an assassin!
Wonder Woman, I expected you to show up, but you won't deflect my neck shot. What is going on here?
Mr. Secretary General, find some cover. An assassination attempt. Great, Wonder Woman. You kicked the gun away. I got it now.
You've got the gun, but you won't get me.
You move fast for a stodgy old military man, but at the end of this corridor, there's just... a wall? Great Hera! He crashed through that wall as if it were cardboard. And now he's outside, flying into his own power, calling robot plane.
At the command of its Amazon mistress, an immeasurably powerful invisible plane zooms down from the sky, hovers briefly above her, dropping a rope ladder.
I've got the ladder. Now climb, robot plane. Follow the flying man.
We are back, ladies and gentlemen, in our luxurious Vancouver, British Columbian studios. I'm Greg Phillips. With me, as always, is Nick Duke. We are the Hard-Traveling Fanboys. We hope you enjoyed our discussion about the motion picture Wonder Woman, but now it's time to get to the weekly nitty-gritty, the segments that we like to call our longest-running segments on the longest-running weekly episodic comic book podcast
in all
of Place to Be Nation.
Place to Be Nation.
And we're going to start things off this week a little bit different than we did last week. We're going to shake things up a bit, and we're going to start with our weekly look at the news and...
Oh, what could that be?
Oh, my goodness. Hot off the presses, folks. It's the Ho-Ho Loon
Come
ticker.
and get it. Extra. Read all about it.
Let's see what we got here. Adventureland theme park. Free Klondike Bill glass boat ride. No, that's not it. Ah! Here it is. Ladies and gentlemen. Ho-Ho Loon. Still employed by World Wrestling Entertainment, which means Nick.
Which means, of course, consequently, he's still in the WrestleMania 33 program.
That's right. This is the kind of information that you can't get anywhere else on the internet. You can't get it on the mothership, Place to Be Nation, the only place to be in your pop culture world. You can't get it on any of the other comic book podcasts here. You won't be finding this on Bill Simmons' show. You won't be finding this on Peter Rosenberg's show. You won't be finding this anywhere on the internet. Not even on Jim Ross's podcast, which you can find on Podcast One. You can only find this on
and, of course, follow him on Twitter at JRSBBQ.
That's right, at JRSBBQ. And
or visit the world's least trafficked website, www.jrsbbq.com.
Folks, if you just visit the website, I mean, you'll see the same material that's getting copied and pasted on websites, quite frankly, all over the internet. But that's neither here nor there, quite frankly. We're glad that you come to us as your only source of Ho-Ho Loon information. We don't know who sends it to us. We don't know where it comes from. We just know that we're thankful for the information.
Quite the mystery.
Absolutely. But speaking of mysteries, there's all kinds of mysteries in the world of comics and comics news. And speaking of really bad transitions, let's get into our weekly look at the news and notes in the comic book world, a little segment that we like to call...
Welcome to the Rundown, where we talk some comic news. Welcome to the Rundown, where we talk about movies too.
Oh, those are some just outstanding guitars. Wouldn't you agree, Nick? I mean, that's Hendrix S.
Oh, absolutely, I'd agree. Just brilliant work by whoever that is.
Tremendous. So, starting us off is a report from Deadline, actually, that Frank Miller's Sin City, which not too long ago had a big screen sequel that most of us were pretty fond of, thought was decent.
Fair, not too shabby.
But now is getting a live-action TV series reboot to be overseen by former Walking Dead showrunner Glenn Mazzara. Underworld director Len Wiseman is reportedly in line to direct the pilot and will act as one of the producers alongside Frank Miller, Glenn Mazzara, and the Weinstein brothers, and someone named Stephen Leheureux. And that's the best I can do with that. Now, apparently...
Stephen Le Bossu.
Which, of course, is French for Stephen the Bossu.
The Bossu, yes.
This small-screen Sin City reboot, and this is coming from Newsarama, is described by Deadline as a, quote, far departure, end quote, from the films, but will, quote, hew closely to the graphic novels, end quote, with original characters and timelines within the Sin City universe. Now, Nick, I want to ask...
How are you going to hew closely to the graphic novels
and be a far
but also have original characters and timelines?
I got a better question. How are you going to hew closely to the graphic novels and yet be a far departure from the films, which are direct adaptations of the graphic novels?
This is a weird way of saying things here.
Certainly.
Some might say an inaccurate way of saying things, but quite frankly, it's not for me to say.
Now, in my opinion, there's nothing wrong with a Sin City television series. I think there's a lot of potential there if it gets on the right network, which is key, because this has to be on a premium channel, right?
I would, yeah. I mean, at the very least, AMC, but preferably Showtime HBO, I would think.
Right. Maybe FX would allow them to push the boundaries, but not enough. It's got to be Showtime, HBO, Cinemax, something like that. So that's fine, but what worries me or what confuses me, and yes, Frank's involved, so it's probably going to be to his vision, but the films were pretty much panel-for-panel recreations of the graphic novels, in most cases.
Down to the artist, I mean... Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I'm all for a Sin City television show, but I would prefer something like if they wanted to do what the movies did, but in a weekly format, I'd be all for that. Absolutely. Whatever this is, I don't know. I'm a little more hesitant on.
Yeah, it's certainly. Oh gosh, if only there were a term to describe it. Certainly a. Oh gosh, what would you say in that situation, Nick? I don't know. I can't even place the words.
Well, I would think it would be certainly a unique situation.
There it is. That's what I'm looking for right there. Well, from one unique situation to one unique situation that would get certainly some waves stirring within the Hard-Traveling Fanboys, I believe, and get us somewhat intrigued in the possibilities, because there's a possibility that's been floated out there, folks, by a certain individual, a talent, if you will. And that possibility, ladies and gentlemen, it comes to us from the eccentric actor Manu Bennett, who is best known to...
Are we now describing him as eccentric? That's awesome.
And, hey, we're fans of Manu Bennett here at the Hard-Traveling Fanboys. We're
Absolutely.
We're not just members of the Manu Bennett fan club. We're founders of the Manu Bennett fan club in our minds. But he's a little out there. I think that's fair to say, Nick. And
yeah, at times, yeah.
And
especially with his online persona.
Yes, he is known, of course, for playing Deathstroke in Arrow on the CW, and certainly one of our favorite characters on that show. And he floated out the possibility just last week of Deathstroke getting his own CW series. Now, the wording of the tweet is important here because it's not like he's saying this is going to happen or this is even a possibility. He says, I think the most important person to get behind any Deathstroke original series, hashtag, is at Marv Wolfman, who created the character. To which Marv Wolfman responded, much appreciated, Manu. I love Deathstroke, and I was overjoyed to see your return and would love to see you do more. Now, he also encouraged his fans to go online and kind of pester Mark Guggenheim, the Arrow producer, along with the CW, along with Warner Brothers, to make this happen, to allow this to happen. And I don't know about you, Nick, but I am 100% on board with this possibility, however remote it may be, because A, Manu is an awesome Deathstroke, and B, Deathstroke can absolutely carry his own series, especially with the changes that we saw in the Arrow finale.
Yeah, I'm all for it. Absolutely. Got the supporting cast there with Wintergreen, and if he got his own show, that would always open the door for future Arrow and Deathstroke crossovers, which is really what I'm ultimately wanting is a little bit more Deathstroke in the Arrowverse. So, if a little bit more Deathstroke leads its way to an entire series of Deathstroke, I'm all for it. And why not, man? I mean, give us something in the off season. Why not give us a little, 13 episode half season the way you did Legends season 1? Nobody says you have to be stringently tied to the 23 or 26 episode season. I mean,
absolutely.
Write a season that you think tells the story you want to tell and tell it. I mean, don't feel like you have to produce, 24 hours of television every season.
It would be incredible, and I think you hit the nail on the head. 13 episodes would be plenty. Come out and give us this hard-hitting, punchy Deathstroke series. It would be great. And as two guys that have supported the Arrowverse from the beginning, if there is a remote chance that anyone from the network is listening, most likely not, almost assuredly not. But if you are, please give this some thought, because we would absolutely watch every episode of it. Now, speaking of the Arrowverse, casting announcement this week. A new member to the Legends of Tomorrow team. And this member comes from the world of television, from Saturday morning television, in fact, and also from the world of the comics. And that character is Isis. Now, for those of you who are maybe not comic book fans, you might most remember Isis from the TV show Secrets of Isis back in the 70s, which spun out of the live-action Shazam show. However, for comic book readers, we most know Isis from her relationship with Black Adam. She is Black Adam's lover and confidant, and is a major character in the comics around the time of Infinite Crisis and 52 in particular. She's a major player in that 52 storyline. So, she's going to be joining the cast of Legends and adding a little bit of the magic element. The description of the character from the Hollywood Reporter describes her as a Muslim American, quote, gray hat hacktivist who is recruited from the year 2030 and who has secret hidden powers derived from an ancient source. And that ancient source, of course, will most likely be tied into the Shazam continuity. Your thoughts on this this character, who, by the way, I should probably mention the actress who's been cast to play her. Her name is Tala Ash, and not really familiar with her history there, but she'll be playing Isis on Legends of Tomorrow. Your thoughts?
I really don't know much about Isis in particular, other than her involvement with Black Adam. So the most I can say here is that if it's going to lead to any sort of involvement from the Marvel, from the Captain Marvel or Shazam family of characters, whether that be Black Adam, Shazam himself, or any of the other subsequent characters like Taki Tawny, I think would be really cool on Legends of Tomorrow, although probably really hard to pull off on their CGI budget. It'd just be a cool touch. Although I would wager that seeing Black Adam himself or Shazam probably unlikely, given that the fact that they've already got The Rock attached on the big screen and they're still showing some trepidation on having multiple versions of the characters bouncing around out there.
That's right, and you wouldn't want to have you wouldn't want to step on The Rock's toes because, as you know, he'll slap the lips off you if you do. So, wouldn't want that to happen. But nevertheless, I'm excited, and I think that is an untapped part of the DC universe to this point that has a lot of potential. Particularly, is there a better show that it would fit on than Legends? Absolutely not. I mean, it's the perfect fit for that kind of universe, that magic, kind of whimsical side of the DCU.
Absolutely.
So, moving on from that, let's move on to the printed page, and a bit of a spoiler for those of you reading the comics. I don't feel too bad about this one, though, Nick, because DC actually spoiled it themselves by going to USA Today and allowing them to run the headline and run the pages. But the big comic book news of this week, at least, it comes from the pages of Batman in the spoiler that the book, which is out now by the time you're listening to this podcast. In Batman number 24, the big climactic moment is Batman, after all of these years, proposing to Catwoman. And writer Tom King gave an interview with USA Today about it. He says that this is the culmination of their 75-year relationship, quote, into one unprecedented moment. I want people to go home and be like, should she marry him? Should she say yes? There's a whole conversation that could come out of this, end quote. This is going to lead into Batman 25, where Bruce says before Selina makes up her mind, there's something he needs to tell her about his darkest moment. I don't really give a shit about all that stuff. I am so in on this, Nick. I don't care. Tom King literally just became blah, blah, blah the rest of this article, because all I needed to see was that page where he proposes to her. And Tom King could have said that he's going to kill both of them by having Le Bossu run them over with a bulldozer, and I wouldn't have cared or paid attention. All I saw was that proposal. I'm in. I'm adding Batman back to my pull list until they pull the rug out from under me again. As has happened many times, every time I want to remove Batman from my life in the comic book form, Tom King does something to pull me back in. And this is the ultimate hook for me. This is my second favorite relationship in all of comics, and I am really looking forward to seeing where this is going.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I've, kind of advocated for a while, but never actually thought would happen. And so seeing them even teasing it so directly, as we discussed earlier on the phone, I would be stunned if it ever actually played out to the point of them actually being married, even for a brief time. I think they'll probably find a way to get out of it long before then. But the fact that they're even exploring the story is a big, huge deal. And I'm glad to see that DC, I know some people were upset about the fact this got spoiled. Hey, Marvel has been pulling this trick for the better part of 3 years. It's about time that DC jumped in on a little bit of the mainstream publicity that can come from something like a USA Today. So good on DC, in my opinion.
And that's the one thing, Nick, that makes me think they might follow through on it. Because by going big with this, by going mainstream with this and leaking it to a major outlet as an exclusive, don't you run the risk, if you don't follow through, with being accused of false advertising, or being accused of, not of false advertising, but of selling wolf tickets, as Nick Diaz might say, of getting people to buy into something you have no intention of actually delivering?
That's a good point. So maybe they will be. Maybe they do have intentions of following through on it. I am trying to keep my expectations low.
Understandably,
I guess.
After Hush, I remember I was reading that. I was a religious reader of Batman at that time, and when Hush ended, I was so hopeful that the next big story arc, whenever at the time I thought Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee would come back and do a sequel, I thought they'd bring Bruce and Selina back together, and instead, subsequent writers just drove them further apart, other than Paul Dini, who actually brought them back together for a time. But it's just a relationship that makes sense to me, and damn it, why can't, and Tom King even brings this up in the article, why can't Bruce Wayne be happy once in a while? What else can you tell about Batman being tortured and miserable and pissed off? That's been told for the better part of the last 40 years at this point. Let's see what happens when something good comes to his life. Let's see what happens when, when he gets a chance to maybe have a chance to try to have this thing that he says he's always said he could never have. Well, let's see. Let's see what happens when he gets a chance to really have someone who gets him and who can allow him to be happy with. And, maybe they won't do anything with it. I hope they do. I think there's room for it. And it's been a long time, Nick, since, especially at DC, since we've had that major positive status quo change in a superhero relationship in terms of a superhero actually marrying his significant other. We haven't seen that since that I can recall, as far as, I remember Green Arrow and Black Canary getting married in the maybe 2009, maybe. But before that was Wally and Linda, and then Lois and Clark before that. So it doesn't happen very often. I think it would be cool to see. I don't see any reason not to do it.
I agree. But, we know how these things all too often turn out. So I am keeping my expectations low, as I said.
That is correct. But I wanted to read this quote from King real quick. Everyone's done vengeance. Everyone's done, quote, the night is too dark, King says. Giving Batman more pain doesn't reveal anything about his character because he's taken as much pain as he can. But giving him love and joy, that combines with the tragedy of his past into something new and never done before. Very true. And on an unrelated note, the ending of The Dark Knight Rises is awesome. Screw off if you disagree. But I do. So, now that we've got the rundown out of the way, Nick, what else could be left? Why, I think it's the longest running segment in HTF history. And that, of course, would be... Well, as you know, folks, there's not been much in the way of watching going on around these parts. Now...
Not a bit.
There's just ain't much comic book related on to watch. There's American Gods, but neither one of us have the ability to watch it right now. So,
nope.
Nick, have you had a chance? I don't think you've had time yet to catch up on Legion or any of that stuff, have you?
No, haven't done any of that. None of that yet.
We've been busy. We've been tied up. We've been moving and shaking at the Duke compound in recent weeks. So, a lot of activity going on. Now, we have been doing some playing, however. I had a chance over the weekend at the Duke Depot, which sits on the former grounds of the Duke compound. The original, which sits on the grounds of the original Duke compound. The original Duke compound, which is still a Duke compound, I suppose.
It is, just not. It's just a
What I'm going to need you to do,
the old family.
I'm going to need you to design me a chart to really explain the.
I can do that now with a whiteboard.
A whiteboard would be great. If you could explain to me maybe the terminology of how it all works at the Duke compound. And Duke compound east, is it? Or west? East?
Well, I live at Duke compound west. Yes, that is an accurate statement.
So, we got a chance to play Injustice 2 is what I'm driving at here. Now, Nick, you've already played...
Injustice what? Injustice
2.
Exactly. Yes, we did.
Now you, Nick, have played through the story mode. I have not. I started it, but didn't get very far. We did, however, play a ton of multiplayer matches on this one. What are your thoughts on the game? How does it compare to the first one?
Yeah, I would say overall from a gameplay standpoint, I think it's probably a little bit more polished than the first one. I think it's a little bit smoother in terms of the animations. I think some of the movesets on the characters are a little bit more varied. I do think personally that the story mode is a little bit of a step backward in terms of overall engagement of the story. But at the same time, the animations are great, the characterizations are great, the cutscenes are great, so can't complain too much. So overall package in the smoother, a little bit smoother gameplay with some of the expanded single player offerings for this game that kind of keep you coming back with the addition of something called multiverse mode, which kind of provides tiered challenges for you to level up your character against that refresh constantly, seemingly providing a never-ending stream of content. Overall package, I got to give the edge to this one, although I love the first one as well.
Yes, definitely. I have to agree from playing this one. I think this one plays smoother. I think that there is more variety in the play styles of the characters. I think it's a little bit easier to pick up and play this one than it was the first one in terms of giving you a chance to hang with people who have a little bit more experience, because I had never played it before, and I was able to, after several trial and error attempts, was able to defeat Russell a few times and beat Nick a few times. And just by trial and error with different characters. And I think everybody finds their best characters through trial and error on this one, as you did on the first one. But I really like the variety of specials, the variety of combos. Every character really felt like they played like those comic book characters should play to me. And it was especially cool to see some of the awesome moves that they put in there. Darkseid's Omega Beams are phenomenal to watch in action. The super move for Darkseid is probably my favorite, and although there's a lot of great ones, Flash has some amazing moves in this game, visually, his super move in particular. Really, really very enjoyable game. As for my best character, I was shocked after much trial and error to realize that my best character in the game is actually Harley Quinn. I really did well with her. She has great combos. Nick, who is your best character on the game at this point?
Probably either Green Arrow or Atrocitus. Those are the two I find myself bouncing back and forth between pretty evenly, depending on what kind of play style I'm feeling at the time. If I want a straightforward tank approach, I go with Atrocitus. If I want something a little bit more strategic and range-based, I'll bust out Green Arrow.
Very good. If you're playing the game, we want to hear your thoughts on it too, so shoot us those. Go to the Place to Be Nation Facebook, Place to Be Nation Comics Facebook page, and we'll chat it up about some Injustice to you. But other than that, nothing much going on. I'm playing the mobile game of Injustice, which is really hard. I'm playing the DC Legends game, which just came out with a great Wonder Woman movie DLC. So I'm playing through that as well and unlocking characters. So that's fun. But other than that, I think it's time to get the last segment of our show, which is reading. And it should come as no surprise. I was out of town all weekend hanging out at the Duke compound, and thus haven't had much time to read comics. My commute makes it difficult. But nonetheless, I found time to read one. So I am going to start us off with my only comic of the week, which is by default my number one comic of the week. Wonder Woman number 15, the first part of the Truth story arc. Yes, I realize I am months behind on this book. However, I am endeavoring to catch up. And I'm doing that for a very specific reason, by the way, which we will get to maybe later on this show. But this is a great issue. This is, of course, Greg Rucka and Liam Sharp responsible for this one. Laura Martin, I believe, on colors. Yep, it was. This has one of my favorite two-page spreads that I've seen all year in comics that I've read. And it's an image of Diana's face on the right side and a bunch of panels coming out of the back of her head, which is exploding into shattered glass and a tree and an image of a dude and little panels of her entire history with Steve Trevor and Cheetah and all this other stuff. It is an incredible panoramic type image. One of my favorites of the year to this point. Just an awesome issue, another awesome issue in the series. Telling simultaneous stories of intrigue going on in Themyscira, Steve Trevor and Barbara Ann Minerva, and Etta Candy trying to figure out what Kale is doing to go after them. And, of course, Diana in her asylum where she has been placed due to her mental break at the end of the Lies story. Awesome stuff. And, by the way, if you haven't checked it out, you need to check out our buddy Russell's interview or podcast with Liam Sharp, the artist of Wonder Woman. You can find it on our Place to Be Nation pop feed right now at Seller's Points, The Guide to Wonder Woman. It's a great interview with Liam. He has a lot of great insights. Cool dude. Awesome get by Russell on that one. So check that out if you haven't yet. But yeah, Wonder Woman 15. This would probably be my number one pick regardless of what I read this week.
Awesome. Glad to hear you're finally getting caught up on the Wonder Woman books. Moving on to my books, I read 5 this week, so real quickly I'll run through these. And I'll start with my bottom book of the week, and this is a little bit of a surprise, but I'm going with the Wonder Woman Annual as my bottom book of the week. I loved the Greg Rucka and Nicola Scott story that started the book. The problem is the stories that finish it aren't all that compelling. They're not consistently written. They're not all that interesting, and the art, by and large, on those other 3 stories is pretty bad, honestly. So, big thumbs up for the Greg Rucka story, and big thumbs down for everything else, and it winds up being my bottom book of the week. My number 3 book of the week, I've got Star Wars Dr. Aphra number 7. This is part 3 of the Screaming Citadel storyline. Kieran Gillen writes this one, and he continues to write the dynamic between Luke and Dr. Aphra very well. It's clear that Aphra is kind of playing Luke a little bit. She finds him to be a bit naive, but it's a dynamic that works. And it also works, the classic Han and Leia and other Star Wars characters into the story at this point. Interesting to see them playing off of Aphra as well and kind of reacting to the situation they now find themselves in. So yeah, I'm enjoying the Star Wars crossover event. On my number 2 book of the week, I've got Old Man Logan 24. This sadly brings an end to the Jeff Lemire era of Old Man Logan. Andrea Sorrentino provided the cover, even though he didn't provide interiors. So it also sadly brings an end to his tenure on the book as well. Brings a very, very poignant end to the past life story and to the story that Lemire has kind of been telling for the better part of this last year and a half. Really, really well done comics. I can't wait for you to go back and read this run at some point, I should say. Just a great example of how to tell interesting stories with this character.
Awesome.
Finally, my number 1 book of the week, I've got Secret Empire number 3. This continues to move forward the Secret Empire story in a very interesting direction, showing how both the Resistance and Hydra are now searching for these fragments of the shattered cosmic cube, each seeking to fix what they perceive to be wrong with reality and wrong with the world. But the main reason this one finds itself at my number 1 spot is it is primarily drawn by Andrea Sorrentino, who is, of course, my favorite artist in all the comics. He absolutely nails it, bringing his trademark style to this book, something that I think is absolutely just makes the book feel that much more important. So I'm loving this Secret Empire story. I know it's controversial for a lot of people, but I am enjoying the hell out of it thus far. And then finally, my only quick hit, which would, I guess, be technically my number 4 book of the week, is the Teen Titans Special number 1 that wraps up the Lazarus Contract story. And it ends up leaving each of these 3 titles in a very interesting place, that being Titans, Teen Titans, and Deathstroke. Interesting status quo shifts for all 3 in the final pages of the book. I will say, I thought this one lost track of the characters a little bit. I thought all of the characters started to act a little bit out of character, particularly Damian. I know he's supposed to be a dick, but he does something in this book that has severe long-term consequences that, in my opinion, I think Damian would be a little bit too smart to do something so rash and so dumb. So while I enjoyed this book overall and enjoyed the story, didn't quite enjoy it as much as some of the other stuff that I read this week.
Interesting. Yes, I'm looking forward to catching up on all of that. I don't actually read Teen Titans, so I'm curious if I'll be able to make sense of the crossover with
Well, luckily there's only one. It's only one issue of each plus the crossover special. So you'd only have to pick up the one issue of Teen Titans to get the full story. And yes, you would need to pick up that issue of Teen Titans, in my opinion.
Gotcha. Well, that's good information. Certainly good comics all around. And that being said, that's it. That's all we got. We do have, of course, more coming to you from Wonder Woman month here at Place to Be Nation Pop and in the Hard-Traveling Fanboys. We've got a countdown, I believe, coming up here in just a couple weeks, right? And then next week we've got a very, very, I know we've said this every week recently, but truly a very special episode, I believe, of the Hard-Traveling Fanboys. Nick, I believe this has to do with a certain failed TV pilot. Is that correct?
Yep. Next week we're going to be going off the page with the failed David E. Kelly Wonder Woman pilot that he produced for NBC that starred Adrian Palicki. Universally derided online to the point of legend. Greg and I have never seen it. I don't know, Greg, have you ever sat down and watched it?
No, I watched the very beginning to make sure that it was a legitimate file that I found, and it was. And so we are going to sit down and watch this for the very first time, and you'll get to enjoy it with us, folks.
Absolutely. So we're going to be doing that next week. And then as Greg mentioned, in 2 weeks' time, we'll be having a countdown of our top 5 issues of the Greg Rucka Wonder Woman Rebirth era run. So counting down our top 5 issues of that 25-issue run. And then ending up the month, because we have 5 Thursdays in the month, with a giant size edition, as it's time once again for the biggest night, the most prestigious night in all of Place to Be Nation Pop. That's right. It's time for the 2017 Haffy Awards. And I must tell tales out of school. We have already recorded this show. It is in the can. The Haffies have been awarded. We're going to be bringing that to you at the end of the month. One thing for people to keep in mind, please keep in mind, this was recorded before Wonder Woman was released theatrically. So that film was not considered for Haffies, and probably, I don't know that it would have wound up winning the Haffy, but it would have made it a bit of a tougher decision. But just keep that in mind when you hear that in a few weeks.
That's right. And you'll get to hear this awesome song. Do, 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 do. And probably the Linda McMahon theme song, too. So.
Do, 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 do.
Yes, the song that instantly makes you think of charisma and energy and passion, the 3 words that define the Hard-Traveling Fanboys. I think that defines us, don't you?
Absolutely.
So, with all that being said, folks, we've got a lot of great stuff coming your way. Haffies coming your way. We've got more projects down the line that we don't want to talk about just yet that are going to be certainly unique in nature. And for the time being, let me give you my final thought. My final thought is go see Wonder Woman now. Do it. Do it now.
Under its relentless skies, that big city heights, I felt you walk right through me. You're the thing that I invoke, my old persistent ghost, sent to make me crazy.
And oh, it's hard now. With time, it works out.
To be human is to love, even when it gets too much. I'm not ready to give up. To be human is to love, even when it gets too much. I'm not ready to give up. Oh, the tigers have me now. I don't care. I hear them howl. I let them tear right through me. Can you help me not to care? Every breath becomes a prayer. Take this pain from me.
And oh, you can't change it.